All right, welcome back. We are still on this Simple Numbers, Straight Talk, Big Profits by Greg Crabtree. This is where we're starting chapter 3, number 2, or so 1 of 2 for chapter 3. There you go, part 2. I also want to touch up on a few things after watching my video. A few things maybe I could have made a little bit more clear. So in this chapter, we're talking about labor productivity. 2 examples I'm going to touch on. Last night was the Super Bowl, and the Chiefs did win, and so did my wife's queso. Let's first go back on the first example here. We were talking about in the last video, if you didn't get a chance to watch it, go back and do it, where these examples, the author had drawn a couple different examples of 2 different businesses, and talked about their profitabilities and went along the way. And I mentioned that when he started consulting this customer, this person was already doing $4 million a year, but the profit did not grow. And what he showed them how to do was to become more profitable, was actually scaling back their sales. All right, so that would freak me out, but we did that, and it actually worked. So I'm not saying this is your best your choice right now, but this is the example I use it, and I'm going to share a little bit about that as well. So in ratcheting down their sales, this is what he said. They examined unprofitable customers and stopped taking on customers that produced low gross profit. We mentioned earlier, I'm going to re-examine some of my truck washing accounts. And since their revenue declined, it gave them an opportunity to trim the staff and retain the core employees they felt were keepers. And so, unfortunately, we had to go through that as well. And I lost some really great people that I really enjoyed. But just knowing I couldn't keep everyone. And my bad decision, don't do this. This is where we have to kind of, I would say man up, but really adult up, okay? I made the decision that I would let everybody starve equally. What I meant was, as we had less sales, I had less hours to give for my technicians. And in doing so, I thought everyone was all in the same boat together. But what happened was, some understood what was going on, and without knowing the full story, they kind of filled in the examples for themselves. And they jumped ship. They got jobs somewhere else. I actually lost a couple really good technicians that way, ones that I didn't want to see leave, but right now they're in other jobs and they're happy with that. Some people say they got a real job, right? When they start, when parents start talking about, hey, you need a job that's in a factory, that's more stability and benefits, all those kind of things that we work on as well, and we're growing and have a great work environment, but I can understand. That was my fault. I had let that go too far. So what I looked at now is I kind of put indicators in my budget. When I forecasted for this year, 2024, I also did what's called an 80% budget, which means what if I'm wrong? What if we are going to go back in sales? What if, who could have predicted COVID in their budget, right? What if those things kind of happen? Actually, we made more money in COVID because we have more opportunities for cleaning. But what happens if something like that happens and it's not in my favor? I made an 80% budget, or 80% forecast, you might call it. And in there, I put a massive red line. This is where we're going to start bleeding terribly, and things got to get cut. And it was very uncomfortable. I didn't like the feeling at all doing that budget. I just saw the things I had to cut to make it work, and it didn't feel good. But in letting people go at the right time can save your company. Does everything have to go down with the ship? No. You have to make sometimes unfortunate decisions of, if we made bad decisions and our business projections are not doing what we're fully capable of doing, or not really working as hard as we should be, there's going to be consequences in that. And later in this topic, we're going to talk about the 3 dangerous options a lot of business owners make, and I've made as well, that can be really bad for your company. So moving back on track here, I wanted to make sure I cover that, what they did and how they ratcheted back with me, back with Mac, right? We found out that doing some jobs were more profitable with one person. I talk about, we made sure we had safety. We made sure we were very successful, and our customers were still real happy with quality, and also we had still quality of life for our team. And that was one way we did that, because we needed less people all of a sudden. We became more profitable, and we built back. And much to the amazement of my accountant, he didn't think it was possible. Well, don't ever underestimate the Jesus in us that does that. So back on track here. Oh yeah, let's talk about the NFL again. Wowzers, huh? Was that a game? I actually did watch it, okay? And no, I'm not going to give you all the insights, and because there's people out there way more talented than me, with way more passion than me in that kind of arena, literally. But one thing that was interesting, we talked about salary caps in the last video. We talked about not everybody can be a multi-million-dollar athlete. We have to make decisions on our budget, or they call a salary cap. One thing I want you to understand is Mahomes, I believe, is the highest paid person in the NFL as far as a player. And doing some of the math, looking at his contract, making about $45 million a year. That's pretty darn good. Okay, so I'm not here to comment on that, but just the example of the Chiefs' strategy is a superstar along with other great teammates. But there has to be something that said to understand, though, that the 49ers, their quarterback, Purdy, he was a draft, okay? I think he got one of the lowest pick drafts out there. So he was drafted in there. And the funny thing is, the NFL has a minimum wage, okay? And it's not $15 an hour. But they do have a minimum wage. He's above minimum wage with only $1 million a year, right? Like, wow, I could do good with $1 million a year, but I could not perform like Mahomes or Purdy, okay? But the 49ers had Purdy, and they took Purdy and his team went to the Super Bowl. Purdy was only making $1 million a year. Mahomes and the team won the Super Bowl. Mahomes making $45 million a year. Okay, so you can see the different kind of strategies. So sometimes we have to figure out, do we have a system in place to train people to perform what we need to? And sometimes, do we have opportunities for them to be able to move up with a company? But not always. Okay, this is the hard part to understand, is not everyone's going to stay, and that's not always a bad thing. When teams move on, sometimes they're dreaming of something different. I like to say that, a little example, two hands here. I like to say that with our company, we're kind of like a refueler jet. Now here in Kansas, we have the refueler company, the 190th, the National Guard, big refuelers, the Kansas Coyotes. They're massive refueler jets, okay? And our shop was like real close to, we have to take off all the time. So these refueler jets, they can fly for a long time, long distances. These little fighter jets will come up here and then refuel so they can kind of shoot off. So when we're taking fighter jets overseas, they can't just fly on their own. They don't have enough fuel in the tank, but the refuelers do. And so like I say, our company is like a refueler. That little jets will fly along with us for a while, help us out, but sometimes they're filled up, hopefully with a lot of good things and things they learned before they fly off to do the things that they're meant to do. So don't feel bad. Just know that's part of the system. I'm also going to share about two of the Brandons I know in Canada, but here pretty soon. Okay. Determining your salary cap. Now this example is simple, but I'm also going to talk about some things that we do as well. So he talked about if you are doing a $1 million a year company. Some of you may not be there, some may be above that. So determining a $1 million company, if you want to have a 10% profit, you're doing $1 million a year, pre-tax profit of course, then you're going to have $100,000 left over. Then pay taxes on that, right? So if you understand, then if I'm going to do $1 million at the very bottom, it's got to have $100,000 left over, which is 10%. I can play with $900,000 in here, right? Which means it's for salaries, for expenses, those kind of things. Actually, those are the ones he learned. So if you look at, you're going to do $1 million a year, $900,000 left over, and you have things that are non-salary expenses, like you're going to have shop rent. You're going to have utilities. You're going to have marketing, all these kind of things. It works really good to put it through the budget to understand that. And if you don't know what I'm talking about yet, there are some different examples online of like you're just getting started and it's just you. Congratulations, by the way. But there's going to be some additional expenses you come up with. And you may find a really cool fancy shop like we did earlier on that had amazing offices. And you may feel like, man, I want to get that shop. I can't wait. I can feel it full of all kinds of cool stuff. But we don't always go out and get the biggest fancy shop first. Just like we don't always go out and get the most shiny, polished employee first, right? The college graduate who's going to take your business to the next level. We don't always can afford that. So it also talks about adding employees to the last minute, but then when you absolutely have to, and then sometimes going into a shop or bigger expenses when you absolutely have to. So understanding that in the non-salary expenses, these example of about $400,000 a year. Okay, as I said earlier, shop, utilities, stuff like that. all kinds of subscriptions you have in software. Oh, you can really stack up a bunch of names in software. So he said, so in the example, that was 400,000, which means left over is only about 500,000. Okay, so here's an example here. He talks about, okay, if I have $1 million business, I'm going to have left over 900,000, and then over here I'm going to look at if I'm going to spend $400,000 a year in non-salary. That means I'm going to have about $500,000 a year, somewhere over here. I'm going to cover that up, in salaries, which will include yours. So in that example of just doing $1 million, you can see that's where it is. So that's now I'm determining my salary cap. Some things you can also look at, which is very helpful, is if you're tracking data, you have more knowledge on making better decisions versus just when I think it's going to happen in the future, but I can look at based on past performance, I can make a better shot, okay? Or a better guess. One thing that we did recently, through the winter months here in Kansas, and like everywhere else in the country, had a really bad cold snap, okay? And we were hitting negative temperatures for quite a while. We actually had almost a week and a half of zero work, or zero paid work, okay? And we're a year-round company. We don't do as much in the winter, but we still work in the winter. Some people have added services to extend their seasons. And if you're doing Christmas lights in the winter, maybe after the first year, taking them back down. So your guys are working, you're not bringing anything in, but we actually had 0 hours working, well, close to 0 hours working, but 0 hours in sales while I was gone on a summit here. Now, we could have made some better decisions, and we did give the guys opportunities to come in and clean, organize, retrain safety videos. They all elected to stay home. It was like -4, -10 degrees out. They wanted to stay home. I understand. But in doing that, some people thought, my goodness, winter is going to last forever. Just as seasons change, we also know that there are seasons in our business that can change. Growth seasons, slow seasons. And one of our good technicians decided to jump ship as well. And that made me sad, of course. I don't want to see everybody leave. I enjoy everyone. But in doing that example of when he left, I looked at how much more could I have paid them, which we're talking about here in salary caps. And looking at that, I can determine what their revenue per hour was. We talked about earlier. Different services can have different revenue per hour they bring in. But I can also look at my CRM. I can track customer relationship management software, by the way. There's a lot of different out there. I can track, though, how much revenue per hour this technician brought in, looking at their total year of 2023, how many hours he worked, how many jobs he was on, so I saw all that. And I saw this technician was actually quite high revenue per hour producing, which meant was I could have actually paid this person more, because I could look at how much they brought in and how much more efficient he was versus what his pay was at. So I recommend reviewing that quite often. Not everyone's going to be a multi-million-dollar Mahomes, but some are going to be able to, as they grow in value, to kind of grow that step up. So now he's working in a factory, he's loving it, he's got a set schedule. He's a great guy. Maybe he'll come back like a fighter jet or a boomerang, who knows? But if not, we learned and he learned, and we're both better for that. So moving back on here, back into the managing the salary gap. Okay. This is an interesting one here too, talking about profit and cash flow. Let me get back to my notes, so I'm just rambling on here, okay? Managing cash flow and profit, and then also the Brandons. That's right. Okay, so one thing they talked about is, like I mentioned earlier, adding the shop when you absolutely have to have it. Same way with adding employees when you absolutely have to have them. Now, what that means is when I geared up last year for moving into a different area, I geared up pretty early. And we didn't make the move to get up there into Kansas City. I didn't have a shop up there, but everybody sitting back and forth, and it didn't go so well. We had a lot of extra expenses, paying people just to tag team on other jobs, and we became very much less profitable in those kind of services. So the book to talk about adding employees for a longer time. Now, there's two guys up in Canada, great guys named Brandon, also actually in exterior cleaning, and some of you may have known them. And one of the things I found unique is in Canada, much further north than Kansas, they have winter too, right? And their winter is a little bit longer and a little bit tougher than ours. But I saw how they can go from 0 sales almost to like 200,000 a month in sales. That's a massive jump. And you can't go do that all by yourself as a business owner. So what they found is they had to have a great system for starting something brand new, getting up to speed pretty quickly, becoming efficient, but also be able to give great quality to their customers as well. So that's having a great system for hiring on and getting people onboarded. And there's a few things you can do to do that. One thing I learned in the restaurant industry, I was a restaurant manager for years. I actually proved to be a multi-unit franchisee, which we never really did, but I love pizza, so it would have been a good fit for me, but I've been even bigger than I am now. One thing I learned is if I did a task by myself, I had to do it again, and then again and again. But if I took someone and trained them on what I was doing and why and when, then eventually someone else could take over that task. Now, if you don't have another employee you can do that with you, whatever task that may be, I'm not talking about doing the QuickBooks here. I'm talking about something simple like why I turn on the thermostat to keep my shop from freezing at night, keep all my stuff, freezing. Simple things of why we do simple things. If you don't have a person you can tag with you, take your phone. Film a short little video of why you're doing it, and this is how you do it. And some things that you can, indicate if you're doing it right or wrong, okay? In doing so, you can start creating training videos. And in these training videos, that can help you onboard, which means the new term for hiring somebody, get them up to speed quicker because they can see all these simple things that you have learned. And also it helps you learn better by teaching it, which is also why I'm also doing these videos, because I'm reading and learning as well, and I can learn better by teaching. And those are some of the simple things you can do to kind of be able to make it through that hiring gap. Okay, that's a little extra nugget. Now, this is one of the examples he talked about, some other really cool graphs of cash flow versus profit. Now, cash flow meaning the money in the bank. Okay, we're finally getting paid on things, and the money looks good. Here's the example, which is very similar to commercial style cleaning, or contractors go through this when they do a job and then they get paid on the job 30 to 45 days later, right? In essence, what you're doing is you are financing someone's project of whatever it is. You paid all the materials, you paid all the employees, you got all the work done, and they're going to pay you later. What that does is your expenses are going up, okay, but your cash in the bank is going down. All right, so they talked about if you don't have profit built into it, you're not going to know how fast you're sinking until it's way too late, okay? But you may look at your bank going, hey, I just got like paid $50,000, $100,000. Wow, a $100,000 check. I've not seen one of those yet. Well, that'd be cool. But you're starting to see these things come in, and you think, I have money in the bank. I'm doing well. We're growing. But cash in the bank is what they call a lagging indicator, okay? And money, this sounds weird, money is the result, not the problem. Money is a result of our decisions, of our customers' pay, and that is not going to give us the best indicator ahead of time, okay? That is, what did I say? I had something really cool in my notes and observation. I can find it. Maybe this was it. Can't be done for less. Can't be from it. Money's result, not a driver. I guess I already mentioned that, didn't I? Okay. So now we're talking about, in this example here, they had 5%, 10%, and 15% profitability. At 5%, when they start taking on clients and getting paid way late, what was going on is their debt, okay? So you just started in business, you got excited because you have a good reputation and people enjoy you, and they're paying you a little bit later. So your sales are going up, and then boom, you chunked a bunch of debt because no one's paying you yet, but then you're starting to finally get paid. But this line right here is a break-even line. So you start your business, and then you get a pile of debt because people aren't paying you on time. Let's talk about if you're at 5% profit, as your sales go up, it will take you, was it like 60 some, almost, I can't quite read about 60 months, 60 months to break even. Then you're really finding out if I'm actually making money or not. 60 months later, almost 5 years later, before you actually break even because you had all those sales and then all the debt and you're finally starting getting paid. But it takes a long time. That's a very slow trajectory. Then use the example, what if you're at a 10% profit ratio? You're actually going to break even here about month 33, 34. See that? The different gap here of profitability. But what if you're built in a 15% profitability, you're actually start breaking even now at month 25. So you can kind of see how just being wise to this profit, as we're talking about in this book the whole time, you can make better decisions faster. And then what do I do to get out of these cash crunches sometimes? I've got a massive debt and I got to pay. What are some of my options? Well, you got three that are very typical and not necessarily good options, okay? If we don't have the profit, we have lots of expenses. I'm not saying to do any one of these, but I can say I've done almost all of these. The first one you talked about was, well, you could cover it with debt. Okay, debt. What are options for debt? Well, you can also get a conventional loan, you can get a QuickBooks loan, you can get a credit card loan, all these kind of things. I'm not recommending any one of these. However, I've done it, and I really hope to never have to do it again because it was scary. What happens is you took a loan out, now you got to make payments when you're not even making any money. So if you can't reverse that ship, the little patch in the boat isn't going to fix it because now you got to pay it back with after-tax dollars. But if I have built-in profit, I'm paying the expenses with pre-tax dollars. See how that works? So you're paying debt off with after-tax dollars, and a lot of times they're short-term loans because the people want their money back. And if you're doing a QuickBooks or a credit card loan, they may take it right out of your account, whether you want it to or not. That's a kind of a gamble. I don't know if you want to gamble with your business or your family's financial future. Second thing is you can cover it with sweat equity, which means you don't pay yourself for a while, but how long can you live or accept less than a market-based wage? How long before your family starves, before your wife kicks you out and says, you better go do something? That's something to consider. The last one, the option was, you can get an outside investor, someone to say, hey, can you come partner money with me and put money in my business, like Marcus Lemonis does on the TV show Profit, which is a great show, by the way. Well, you're going to have to do two things to that investor. Pay them back with after-tax dollars, or he had a really funny one, or have a good story to persuade the investor that your zero-profit business is worth a lot of money. That's not a great way to do that. Another way we found out, oops, I'm sorry, I'm making a really shake here. Another thing that we found out to help us through these cash flow crunches is rather than just waiting for 30 to 45 days to get paid, we did two things. We asked for a deposit. Some commercial customers, if it's too big a company, they can't do that. But on residential, we can. Find out what you're able to charge in your area as a deposit, okay? Different states have different rules, but we charge about 50% down for our Christmas lights and our extra house wash. What that allows us to do is pay the team, pay the materials, and then we get paid right after the service by having their credit card on file. By having a credit card on file, understand now that is an additional charge, a different expense for doing the thing, and that's going to go into your COGS because now your cost of goods to provide that service has that extra finance charge on there. That costs you more money. You need to keep that in there to understand profitability. So that was a big part, is understanding we can charge deposits. That helps us out. Another thing is we have what's called a sales stew, okay? This came from experience of learning what happened when I first started cleaning playgrounds or first started doing only commercial. My kids are showing up here. You might hear a little bit of noise. So we found out we're only doing commercial work was that I could go out and get sales, then I would service all those sales, and then I'd be out of money and had to wait to get paid before I can do more, which creates a roller coaster technique. So when we call a sales stew, they might be introducing timing out. When am I going to do these jobs that I know they're going to pay me later, but I got to put in there somewhere jobs that are going to pay me today, because I don't like you, but I like to eat every single day, not just once a month. Which is the feast or famine we talk about. So understand those are a few different options you can get through some of these cash flow crunches here, but those are some options that I did. So stay tuned for chapter 4 as we get started here coming up, which is going to be Business Physics, the 4 forces of cash flow. Thanks for hanging in there. Make sure you make some comments on things you'd like me to address as well in the next videos. Talk to you soon.